The heart grows, which in turn ages us in time. It changes us, makes us drift apart from one another. But we will always have the time that we have spent together. You and me, on that sunset evening. You know, Kingdom Hearts 3 opening gets me choked up all the time, as if it's trying to gather everyone for this one moment in time. And that moment finally did come. It's hard to believe that it's almost been 2 years since Kingdom Hearts 3 was finally released, and we all locked ourselves into our room and played Kingdom Hearts 3, and finally got to see what happened to our favorite characters in the game. And though the series went through a lot in the past 10 plus years after Kingdom Hearts 2, I think it's finally time to give Kingdom Hearts 3 what I think about it and what it has done to me over the years. Hello everyone, BlackCross here, and today I wanted to go ahead and get to you guys what I would call a proper review of Kingdom Hearts 3. Now, technically I did a deep dive into video game review type thing with Kingdom Hearts 3, and that one consisted of an hour-long talking about Kingdom Hearts 3 in its entirety. Well, today I want to go ahead and redo that actually. Remix. But I wanted to go ahead and redo it because I wanted to give you my full-on analysis, my full-on thoughts and feelings in regards to Kingdom Hearts 3. Whether it's from the very beginning, from whenever it first got released, all the way up to the Remind DLC, as well as everything else that came out in Kingdom Hearts 3, because recently this year, I finally decided to sit down and 100% complete Kingdom Hearts 3. I haven't done that whenever I first got the game within a year, and now that Remind DLC had been out for over half a year now, it's time to finally look into it again and kind of feel if it holds up. If not, if it holds up even more so than what I had originally thought it would. So, this is what this video is going to be. This is going to be a full-on thought and review of Kingdom Hearts 3, all the way from beginning to end, everything that I've been building up for the past couple months, my feelings, my thoughts, as well as my opinions on the game itself. So guys, without further ado, thank you so much, and here is my full-on review of Kingdom Hearts 3. To start this review, I think we need to talk about how it all began, which would be of course Kingdom Hearts 2. Back in March 28, 2006, over 10 years now, we were all in trance of what the next installment was going to be like. We had a few things to go on, guys in armor, a desert place, and words that talk about a war. A Keyblade War. That would shake everyone for years before we got to see what it was talking about, and for a while it was silent up until this happened. A moment when Kingdom Hearts fans would be forged and created a new set of games that would go with it. Though not everyone hopped on it, it was clear what was happening. They were trying to build up on Kingdom Hearts 3's story, like what was going to be, what it was we were going to do, and what was going to drive us to achieve our goal. At the end of it all, it did just that and more. We learned so much in those games. To days of being in the organization as Roxas, to Coded with Data Sora and knowing what had to be saved, and to Burst by Sleep, living as the Wayfinder trio and learning who our enemy is going to be. It was all building up for the exact moment. And even more so, we got to learn more of what's to come in Kingdom Hearts 3, in the form of Dream Drop Distance, where the main plot of Kingdom Hearts 3 and what we had to do in order for us to put a stop to their master plan. We needed to save everyone, to protect the light from shadow, and grow as a person. In any case, we was going to experience Kingdom Hearts 3 in a way that we might not have ever thought it would do in its 18 plus years that fans have been invested in with the series. One of the series' problems that most have pointed out through the years is that the story is complicated, that the story is broken up into smaller games with other stories that never needed to be. But I disagree. I think the stories has a way of pulling us in that makes us want to know more. what was going to happen to our favorite spiky-headed friend Sora and his connections with others. If I could describe what it did do was making the story too wide for others to pick up on. That its stories is in other places that some might not be willing to pick up on. I mean, you have the fact that the series has spanned 7 games on like 5 different consoles, from the main console being the PS2, to the handheld devices like the Nintendo DS, the 3DS, followed by the PSP. But guess what? It's not staggered anymore. You can now easily pick up on the story with Kingdom Hearts with these collection sets from the remixes, to the story so far with everything in it, and to Kingdom Hearts all in one package. You can now experience everything that has happened in the series without having to break your bank to play the series. And the story of Kingdom Hearts 3 is absolutely amazing. From the beginning to the end, I was on board to see what would happen. We have witnessed so much in the series. Much like Sora in Dream Drop Distance, I have seen how they felt. So much pain and sorrow. I didn't want it to end there, so I wanted to press forward to see this to the end. The story in Kingdom Hearts 3, surprisingly, wasn't that hard to understand. You just have to remember what happened in the series. And if you can do that, then even everything starts to make sense. And in the end, you get this amazing conclusion, and the resolve of one of the game's biggest entries, the Xehanort Saga. The story of Kingdom Hearts 3 is as follows. Sora, after failing the Mark of Mastery exams, Master Yingsid sends out Sora in order to retrieve his strength after losing it in the battle with Master Xehanort and his compatriots. Sora must then travel to other worlds in order to gather his strength in order to prepare for the ultimate battle against Master Xehanort and his 13 Vessels of Darkness, but also to eventually save Aqua, Van, and others who have fallen into darkness. There, of course, you would have story explanation as well as story expansions in regards when it comes to Sora, Donald and Goofy, Mickey, Riku, Kairi, and Lee as they try to train for the right of Keyblade Mastery, and also to join with Aqua and Ven in the war in the Keyblade War. There they will fight against Master Xehanort and the other 12 organization members, where they will fight to the end for Kingdom Hearts, and ultimately see the end of one of the series' most biggest entries. With Kingdom Hearts, one of the best parts of the game is the gameplay, the battle system. And if you played the series, you know that it has a wide range of different forms of gameplay. From the main games in Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2, to having a deck system in Chain of Memories, to additionals in Burst by Sleep, and some new and fun ways to play in Dream Drop Distance. Kingdom Hearts 3 combines almost all of the best parts of the series and makes it its own game. The first thing that we'll talk about is of course the shock lock system. The shock lock system has been slightly modified, though it's still somewhat the same way as it was seen in Burst by Sleep. Its shock lock system is actually linked to the different Keyblades as well as the Keyblade transformation that goes along with it. So depending on the Keyblade depends on what shock lock system you're going to be using, followed by the transformation sequence in which that will also change in its entirety. It also depends on how long you keep the charge up, for it will also change its look as well. But one of the biggest things that makes the shock lock system so different is its air lock system. Once you lock onto an object, you can then air dodge into the air with the shock lock system. This also works not only to objects but also to enemies, allowing for a quick suggestion when it comes to battling in combat. The trigger command system is now called the situation command, which gives a trigger command like ally abilities, spells, drive forms, and attraction flow rise. With these abilities, it is great for not just using them, but you can earn them through combat. They can also be stacked throughout the entire combat, which makes for crazy and insane moves to be pulled throughout the battle. It makes the game for a far more thrilling experience in the tense of battle. The drive forms have changed, but with a twist, thanks to a new mechanic known as Keyblade transformations. This is yet another level of insanity that adds up more to the flow of combat. With the Keyblade transformation, they also added new features to go along with them. For starters, you can now have up to 3 Keyblades to use in combat, and change between them at any time. Not only that, but if you have your drive form active, you can switch to another Keyblade to save the drive form to be used later in combat. It adds a level of strategy to the game, but you might be asking yourself, what if I like a Keyblade more than another one, but the other one is weaker than the other Keyblade? Well, they made it to where Keyblades are now upgradable. So not only do they grow in strength, but they will have new abilities added to them as you level them up. And there are other small features that makes the game that much more different. Like the attraction flow ride are only attainable if you hit an enemy with a green indicator. Once that happens, you can use it via the situation command. But if you hit L3 while in use, you can see in first person view mode. This was originally made for VR purposes, but was never used due to the fact of how it made some people who viewed it a little bit nauseous at times. But it was nice that they left it in there for people to try it out. Overall, you can see how combat has not only changed, but how it has been enhanced for the game to be. So let's talk about the many worlds that can be found in Kingdom Hearts 3. Some of these worlds technically we have seen, but for the most part, there are all new worlds that can be explored into, each world being different of their own. So first off, you have the fact that you have Olympus being in Kingdom Hearts 3. While technically we've always been into the Olympic Coliseum, we never got to vastly explore the open world, which is, of course, Olympus itself. Being able to climb Mount Olympus all the way up to the Heavenly Gates was really a joyful exploration to see it all in. And of course this made for very wonderful interactions with of course Hercules and Hades put together. Then of course you have Twilight Town, which had its interaction with Hayner, Pince, and Olette. But you also have the interaction with Scrooge McDuck as well as Remy from Pixar's Ratatouille. And of course, although you do explore Pirates of the Caribbean, this one has to be one of the best worlds that could have been added into Kingdom Hearts 3. Not only do you have the story of Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End, you also have the interaction with Captain Jack Sparrow along with Davy Jones. But of course the world itself is probably the best part, and in my personal opinion, one of the best ways that they have done in the entries of Kingdom Hearts. As you explore the open seas, you're actually into another form of minigame, being able to steer the ship of your own, or depending on how far you go in terms of leveling up, you get to control the Black Pearl. But of course you get to open up the fast seas, explore it at its fullest, not only shooting down other enemy ships, but also exploring other islands in order to hunt down for treasures. Which basically makes this probably the best world in Kingdom Hearts 3, if not the best world in the entire series. Which is a bold statement, admittedly, but in all honesty, that's just how it is. It's literally the best world in the Kingdom Hearts series, just because of the fast, open landscape that you get to explore, followed by being able to explore every corner of this world and discover all of the riches that it has to have. That, and the combat with fighting other Heartlesses as well as fighting ships, makes it for a full-on experience. Of course, we can't forget some of the more iconic worlds that was added into Kingdom Hearts 3. You have the main Disney worlds, like for example Tangled and Frozen, that was added on into them. And because of the enhanced graphic detailing, they were able to mimic not only how they looked in terms of the movies, but to also make them feel like as though if they are part of the Kingdom Hearts worlds. Sanford's Tokyo, of course, is another favorite world because of its vast open area that you get to explore of the Fast City. In a weird way, it kind of feels like Kingdom Hearts meets Grand Theft Auto, except a lot more kinder and a lot more nicer than that game. But aside from that though, those are of course the biggest details. But a big detail that was finally added into the Kingdom Hearts games was the inclusion of the Pixar's world. Next to Remy, you have the fact that you have the Toy Story world as well as the Monsters Incorporated world. Adding these two into the game is by far the best parts in the game. A lot of people loved the fact that Toy Story was finally going to be a world in Kingdom Hearts. And to finally have this realization, it was so nice to actually see it flushed out as well as the characters being enabled into the game itself. But Monsters Incorporated actually made it so much more enjoyable and so much more funner than I thought it would actually incorporate itself. While you don't get to really explore Monstropolis, you're mostly inside the Monsters Incorporated factory. But to see the factory in its fullest and being able to explore it, followed by the story portion that has, made it very enjoyable in my personal opinion. And then of course you can't forget about the final world, being that of the Keyblade Graveyard, where you're fighting against the organization members. And while technically we have been to this world, it got to be more expansive because of the final battle. So really when you think about it, the worlds were specially selected not only because of the story portion, but to also showcase how fully developed they were able to make the game into the next generation. being able to combine all of their details and information as well as to pull off better scenery and better visuals than what Disney had originally been able to put out in their history when it comes to making movies. Then again, you are talking to a team that was able to make Kingdom Hearts 3 as flashy and as detailed as they were able to put out there, of course. The thing that I find the most joy out of the series is the completion aspects in the games. And thankfully Kingdom Hearts 3 didn't disappoint me at all. I will be the one to say that Kingdom Hearts is not a game you have to do 100% on, but in some of the games there is a reward for doing it to some degree. But the key to completing Kingdom Hearts is knowing the reward that comes with doing anything that's in the game. For the most part, the main reward is of course the secret video at the end of it all, knowing what we can expect for the next installment. But for Kingdom Hearts 3, that wasn't the main focus. The only thing you really need for the secret video was to get however many lucky emblems that was needed to see it based on the difficulty, which is good for most folks. But to me, to truly experience Kingdom Hearts 3, you want to play it to its fullest. I know that some of it might sound tedious to do, but really it's all for fun. The main part when looking at the completion aspects was the gummy phone. I think most of us moan in annoyance and agony when looking at it for its trying to be with the times. But for the game, it might just be the best thing that could ever have been thought of. Who would think that a phone would make completing Kingdom Hearts 3 that much more interesting? It's fun to take shots of your favorite worlds or your favorite Disney characters, but it works really well as completing the game. For starters, you got the lucky emblems, which is a theme that can be found in the Disney parks, and to see it in Kingdom Hearts was one of the most fun to be had. You'd be minding your own business when someone says they saw a lucky emblem, so then you stop to try and find it, and you do get some items for your troubles when you find a number of them. There are 90 of them, so you get quite a bit for finding most of them. Then the synthesis shop uses a function as well. The Moogle will want photos of certain things in other worlds, which will allow you to make other items that will be helpful in your journey. But stepping away from the gummy phone, the one thing that made me happy was the execution of Pixar characters. One of them was Remy from Ratatouille. Ratatouille is my most favorite Pixar film, and to see Remy in this game brought me joy. You hunt down ingredients from other worlds to make some of the recipes, and so while you get rewarded some items, you will also have these cuisines to enhance your stats, which helps out in the long run of the game. And while you're going to other worlds getting ingredients, you will encounter these Heartlesses known as the Fantastic Seven, a set of Heartlesses with mini-games that you will need to complete with a high score. The higher your score is, the more of the ingredients it gives you, and you will get an ability to go along with it. In many of the worlds, while you hunt for ingredients and the chests that are in each world, as well as hunting down the lucky emblems, you have the world with its minigames. But within some of these chests is another set of objectives to do, and they are the classic Kingdom games. Game & Watch like games that you can play, and each one is different and can be enjoyed to some degree. And let's not forget the post-game stuff that you can go for. The Battle Gates makes a return, and though they don't always contain bosses like in Dream Drop Distance, they are ways to extend the combat if you are looking for either a way to grind levels or to get items for the synthesis shop. They give you accessories and reports to flush out the story a bit. Oh, and how am I forgetting one of the game's way of getting to each world? The Gummy Ship returns, but with a new shiny paint. It's a way different and way more enjoyable than it ever had been in years. Traveling around in open space to fight other ships, getting items, or just customizing your ship to the best that it can be, the Gummy Ship had to be one of the amazing things that they did for the game, and I think many others would agree. But while completing the main game is amazing in its entirety, you might want to go further in for more content that it can give you. When Remind was confirmed for DLC, many would think that this was to be a final mix of some kind. Looking at it now, I wouldn't call it a final mix. In the past, the term final mix would have the following: change the color of most Heartlesses, some new keyblades, a new secret boss or bosses, depending, and a few subtle changes and additions added here and there. And while there were some of it there was other that was added in before Remind became available. For starters, Critical Mode was added in, and I would agree that it should have been part of the main game, but it's a free update to it rather than an actual DLC portion of it. due to how they wanted to make critical mode challenging for the player, they decided to hold it up in order to increase the difficulty and change it up to some way. And did it? Well, yeah. Critical mode was pretty hard on its own, almost like that of Dark Souls. But if you level grind a bit, it's not impossible. With that, you also have 2 items that will allow you to get 2 new Keyblades, and they were the Oathkeeper and Oblivion Keyblade. To attain them, the Oathkeeper, you just find all the lucky emblems, and for the Oblivion, you just beat critical mode. And most would think that the Oblivion Keyblade should be different. You can carry over your Keyblades to a new game when you beat the main game. So really, you get to have a chance of getting both Oblivion and Oathkeeper Keyblades and have it in your any playthrough afterwards. But those aren't part of the DLC. They are updates that you get in the game now. The DLC, however, contains the Remind episode, the Limit Cut episode with the Organization Data bosses, as well as the Data Greed option, and a secret episode. This is something that Burst by Sleep had in its final mix with the secret episode. But in Kingdom Hearts 3 case, it had 3 sets of episodes added to it. But how are these episodes? Well, the Remind episode puts you through the Destined battle again, but with a few changes. All the bosses are one we fought before, with a new few with it. When battling the 13 vessels, you have the option to fight as Sora or as the others when in fight. And we fought as Riku and Aqua before, but now you get to fight as Roxas and of course as Kairi. This is the coolest thing to see in the part. And even though going through it all again may sound pretty repetitive, there were moments in the game that just pieced in perfectly. So it may not be the best part of the DLC, it has some of the best moments in the game that made it worth going through. The Limit Cut episode though is the best part of the DLC. Fighting all 13 data bosses was the best time I had with the game. Some feel that the bosses shouldn't have been that hard to beat to begin with, but in Kingdom Hearts 2 you fought the data bosses at the end game and they were hard and challenging too. I was foolish thinking I could fight them at a low level of 50ish, but you could fight them if you had some skill with the game. Of course, I'm not as skilled as many would be, but regardless, I think you will enjoy these data bosses more than you think. I know I did. But then there is the secret episode, the episode in which you fight Yozora. This was the hardest part of the game. In fact, compared to the data bosses, this is the hardest boss you will fight. Fast, unpredictable, and insane to boot. But is it the hardest in the series? No. No, it's not. That title is still with the Lingering Will, and if you stick with it and master the combat while learning his moveset, you could actually beat him, but he is hard. Let that not fool you. So as a final mix, I don't think works, but as DLC, it's one of the best DLCs out there, and this was the first time Kingdom Hearts had DLC at all. You see, other than its episode, it has a set of codes you can use in the game when you start a new playthrough. The easy codes and the pro codes. The easy, as the name would suggest, makes the game easier for you, though it will cancel out some trophies if you use certain ones. But you have access to the easy merit badges, which are little objectives to complete which are fun to do. Reminds me of Fragmentary Passage with its objectives. But then there is the pro merit badge. You have to have as many as the codes on to rank up as much points to get an A rank, and it wants you to fight as many of the game bosses with these codes on, including the episodes. And while you don't have to have all of them on, if you want to avoid certain bosses, which would be the Yozora boss, you will need to use as much of the codes to your advantage as possible. But overall, these make the DLC that much more worth it in terms of DLC. In fact, to this day, I have always thought that Bloodborne had the best value in terms of DLC. You get the most bang for your buck in Bloodborne, and it was planned to be in parts, but the team went and put it all in one DLC package, and was an amazing quality in the content. Kingdom Hearts 3 matches that, and maybe even better, for the bang for buck value with the amount of content that this is in Kingdom Hearts 3 Remind. Was it pricey? Yes, but you get a lot, and I do mean a lot of content for it. I would label Kingdom Hearts 3 DLC well worth its price, and if you like Kingdom Hearts, you should definitely get Remind for sure. Just note that the Organization Data bosses and Yozora boss fight are going to be challenging, so if I were you, if not familiar with them, set it to the easiest difficulty. Some people wouldn't like that, but trust me, they're that hard. Very hard, but very fun to fight. Organization 13. Perhaps one of the most iconic figures in the game series. They first appeared in Chain of Memories, but was fully revealed in Kingdom Hearts 2. And over time, they were engraved in our minds, our subconscious. We wanted to know more about them, who they once was, and what their plans were. Each member had a purpose, and they all worked for one goal, to build their own Kingdom Hearts and to be whole again. Or at least, that's what they wanted us to think. In Dream Drop Distance, we soon learned that was a farce to begin with. Their real plan was to build Kingdom Hearts, but then put pieces of Xehanort's hearts into them so that they could control them, and to fill the 13 seats for their 13 vessels of darknesses. But the question is, which form of Organization 13 was better? Because, on the one hand, you have the first set of members. Each member was different. They had their own agenda and what they wanted to do in the end. Some even tried to defect against the organization in order to rule it themselves. Some wanted to leave it. Each one had a story of their own. Even though they have no hearts, the truth was that they eventually have hearts, but the organization tried to force the ideal that they had no hearts in order to control them so that they could make Kingdom Hearts. But then you have the real Organization 13. The organization that was finally realized and was used in the climactic battle to forge the Keyblade. The only problem was that at this point, we know who they are. We didn't know at the time, but we had faced them at one point in time or another. In a way, it was more based on nostalgia, but really, that's not bad. It actually made the final battle that much more of a conclusive end. Each member was fought one more time to the very end, and we got to hear their final thoughts. Some actually got me in a sentimental way, especially with Ansem the Seeker of Darkness.
What a journey you and I have had. There is more to seek. So go forth now and seek it.
I think we can agree that this was not the best form of Organization 13, but we can agree that we did enjoy what they became in order for this moment to be an epic ending that helps represent the series, to bring it all back for this ending, for the end of the Xehanort Saga. The Kingdom Hearts series has been known for its villains, like the Disney characters and the Heartless, but there is one person who the fanbase knows more so than they care to admit, that man being Master Xehanort. Was first introduced in Birth by Sleep, we got a clear idea of who he was, but not what he truly was going for. And that was to get Kingdom Hearts and change the world. His plan started with Ventus, where he severed his hearts in two to form Vanitas in the hopes that when they fought, they would forge the Keyblade. But with that a failure, he planned his next course to transfer his heart to a younger vessel. Then later, he was separated in two. Ansem, the Seeker of Darkness, who had hoped to attain the 7 Princesses of Hearts, and Xemnas, who was gathering the 13 members of the organization to form the 13 Vessels of Darkness. Both, however, failed at the hands of Zora. But Xehanort never stopped it. You see, the reality was that he knew what was to come. Not every villain could say these words, and it being threatening.
You forget I plan for every eventuality.
Seriously, you can't get more threatening villain than Master Xehanort. Not only that, but after Birth by Sleep, we knew he would return, and return he did. His plans never waver, even knowing it could bring destruction, or worse, the apocalypse. He continued, in the hopes to see what it would bring. Would it bring salvation to the worlds who were suffering in the darkness that lingered in them? Could it bring balance once more? Or would it create an even bigger problem? It never mattered. All that mattered to him was to get Kingdom Hearts and the Keyblade at one spot and to shift it into motion. In the end, it all failed, and we finally saw the end of Xehanort. He almost achieved it, but thanks to Sora and his crew, they were able to put a stop to his plans once and for all. And in a way, I'm gonna miss him. We fought for so long to stop Master Xehanort that we enjoyed his company. You heard the term, the villain you love to hate. Well, I think we may have loved him much more, that fighting him was the epic climactic conclusion we wanted to see, and it made it that much more for the final parts of Kingdom Hearts 3. And although we've been talking about the mind of Xehanort, we cannot forget the voice of Master Xehanort. Leonard Nimoy was the voice of this Master of Darkness, and you want to talk about memorizing.
In ancient times, people believed that light was a gift from an unseen land by the name of Kingdom Hearts. But Kingdom Hearts was safeguarded by its counterpart, the Keyblade. Warriors vied for that precious light, thus beginning the Keyblade War.
His voice for Xehanort is one to be reckoned with. His voice is of an old master with ambitions and a cunning, tactical mind. One that would ward you of fear and concern, but yet one that kept pulling you in to know more of what he had to say. Because Master Xehanort was cunning, and one you will never forget. Like the voice of Satan luring you in to false sense of security, but you couldn't help it. He made Master Xehanort what he was today, and what we've known him for. The iconic voice, the raspy voice of it all, ever luring, never forgotten. And he would have played the part of Master Xehanort if he had chose to for Kingdom Hearts 3. Alas, his life ended before Kingdom Hearts 3 finally was made, so a new voice was needed to fit the role of one of the series' most beloved villains to date. And it's thanks to Rutger Hauer for lending his voice for such an event. And yes, it did take some getting used to, but I thought he did well with him.
Legend has it that darkness once covered the world. We know so little about the Keyblade War, only that it was just the beginning. If ruin brings about creation, what then would another Keyblade War bring?
It's like the voice of an old man who's finally see everything to come to light, and one that wants to see it to the end, but would stop at nothing to see it through. And then an old man who would finally saw the error of his way, and stop at the end. It would work well for the part that was needed for Xehanort. However, it seems that Leonard Nimoy was not the only voice that was lost to Master Xehanort. Osaka Jika, I hope I got that pronounced, was the Japanese voice for him also, but he too died before Kingdom Hearts 3, and was voiced by another, Azuko Akito. I hope I pronounced their names right, I really do hope so. But unlike Akito, the English voice actor had to go through 3 voices for Master Xehanort. Yes, 3. Rutger Hauer died shortly after Kingdom Hearts 3 release, and when Remind was being thought of, a new voice was needed. That is where Christopher Lloyd came in to being the 3rd voice for Master Xehanort. And damn if he knew the irony, that he was an actor, played a villain with Disney cartoons in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and a part of time travel in Back to the Future. To think that he would play both parts that would combine together with Master Xehanort, a villain who was in the world of Disney and would also time travel to his other selves. He did amazing with Xehanort.
Now we must discuss why we have assembled here today. My incarnations from past times, vessels into which I transferred my heart, my essence, were destroyed. Thus I was restored to what you see now. For one to completely disappear, their heart and body must be restored to their original form.
But not with some countermeasures. You see, not only did he voice in Remind, but he re-voiced lines in Remind that was in the main game. Sort of the same effect with Ansem the Seeker of Darkness with Billy Zane and Richard Escar. You see, Billy Zane voiced him in the first Kingdom Hearts, and much like Master Xehanort, fit perfectly like consorting with the devil himself. It just worked! But he didn't stay with it, and so a new voice was put in place for the future games. And not to say he's bad, He has done better over the years, but when you can line the voices lined up, it kinda hurts a little.
Kingdom Hearts, fill me with the power of darkness.
Kingdom Hearts! Fill me with the power of darkness!
And again, we can do that with both Rutger Hauer and Christopher Lloyd in the same way, though it's not as bad.
The 13 darknesses and 7 lights have clashed 9 times, yielding these 9 keys.
The 13 darknesses and 7 lights have clashed 9 times, yielding these 9 keys.
It's just crazy how within a short time, we had to go through 3 most recognizable voice talents for a master like Master Xehanort. And to those who no longer is with us, may you rest in peace knowing that you will never be forgotten. And to those living, know that you have done your part for the Master of Darkness. With Kingdom Hearts 3 finally over, we can now look over to the horizon to see what comes next. And well, there's quite a bit to look forward to when you think about it all. Like, what's in the box? Who is Master of Master and his plans? And what happened to Sora? Most likely, we won't get the answer to these questions for a while, but I think we can get an idea of what to expect in the next few games. For starters, we have the Lost Masters, and what had been revealed to us as Lushu/Sigbar. If we are to assume that they are protectors of the light, then it wouldn't be too far off that they would be the antagonists for the series moving forward. This isn't the first time that light was put as an evil way. Much like darkness, light can be the same way. There must always be a balance in light and darkness. Without one, and the other cannot exist. And if one way in more than the other, then it's up to the other to counteract to bring back the balance in the worlds. So this would make sense, but what are they up to? Well, chances are they're planning to either bring back their master or to fix a world that they feel is unbalanced. Either way, I feel that the box will finally be used in some form or another. But then there is Maleficent and Pete. Both have been looking for the box throughout the game. I think they might join them long enough to get the box or something. The only thing we have that might confirm this is the ending with Xehanort and Ericus with another game that was featured in. As for Sora, that might be a bit tricky to figure out. You see, this made more questions than answers, the way that it was played out. You see, Yozora, he said this isn't what he normally looks like, but yet, that is him. And that he had to go through some trials to get where he and Sora are at. Not only that, but him saying that he was going to save Sora, and yet he aimed his gun right at him, as if to kill him or something. But then we have this two-sided ending, something that has never been done with the Kingdom Hearts games before. So I'm going to try to piece it together, but this is not 100% what is going to happen. But I think what we have so far might be a good guess anyway. So first, what does he mean when he said that he would save Sora? Well, he might have met with the Master and he was promised to save someone and bring them back to him if he takes care of Sora. The only thing that I have going with this is that we see Master in the secret video. As for what his plans are, I assume he plans to make another Kingdom Hearts. But there is another, and that is Luxord. See, at the end of the Luxord fight, he gives a wild card to Sora, and we hear him at the end of Yozora boss fight. But is he Luxord in human form? Or is it just a voice cast case since it's just one line? One can't be sure, but I think if we are to assume one or the other, it would be the Master's doing. But then there is the double ending. If you lose the fight, Sora turns to crystal and Yozora wakes up like that of Final Fantasy Versus 13. But if you win the fight, Yozora fades and wakes up in the same manner. Either way, it ends the same almost. But what could it mean? I think, and it's not that far off of a guess, but I think Sora might be trapped in a dream world. And Yozora can dream dive as well. Keep in mind, he had said he went through some trials to get there, so it's not far-fetched if Yozora could dream dive. After all, he wakes up in the end regardless of what happens. And Sora committing to sin to undo time, he is trapped in a dream realm, and that is what might come in play for the future of the games. Again, not 100% sure, but it would be a good guess as to what to expect in the future looking forward. But while I hate Yozora fighting him, I love him as a character. He's a mystery as to what is going on, and not only that, but fans of Nomura have known of his ambitious story. And if we are to assume that his work of Final Fantasy First to 13 is not far off, what he wants to do with Yozora could be the same concept as Noctis was in the original plans. I highly recommend you all to look into it, cause this is interesting as to what 15 was going to be before Nomura was pulled from the project, and what it was going to lead to. Either way, it's going to be hard to wait for this part of the story to continue, both with Yozora and Sora, and I am pumped for this in every sense of the matter. So there you have it, my full-on thoughts and review on Kingdom Hearts 3. Is it a perfect game? No, I do have my fair share of problems with Kingdom Hearts 3, within a few small parts here and there, but looking at it now, the reality is that none of that matters. You know, for what I've shown you throughout the entire review, talking about it, having my full-on feelings towards the game, I think Kingdom Hearts 3, for one, I will always love Kingdom Hearts 1 for sentimental reasons, but in my personal opinion, Kingdom Hearts 3 is by far the best Kingdom Hearts game that we have gotten in terms of gameplay, in terms of story, in terms of everything else. Kingdom Hearts 3 is probably, if not is, my game of the year for what it is. And while there may be some people who will throw me in the fire for loving this game, let me just say one thing. I understand. I understand why you might not like the Kingdom Hearts 3 and what it has not delivered for you at the end of the game. But for me, personally, I will still forever love Kingdom Hearts 3 for what it has done for me and for what it has delivered. No matter how much people may waver, my heart will not waver away from Kingdom Hearts 3 in its entirety and how I loved it for so long. My strength for Kingdom Hearts has grown stronger throughout the years, and Kingdom Hearts 3 is a testament to that strong of a heart of how I felt for the series. It's tied together everything from all the small stories that we have gotten throughout the other parts of the series, all the way up to the final end, up to Kingdom Hearts 3's ultimate release. From the very beginning, whenever Kingdom Hearts 3 got released, it was clear that this was a love letter sent to the fans by the development team. They wanted to show their love for our love for Kingdom Hearts, and they delivered it through Kingdom Hearts 3. This review is basically a return love letter to those developers. To those developers, the directors, the creators, everyone in the team at Square Enix involving with the project, I want to say thank you so much for making this game, for making it for what it is, and for how it ended up for all of us. I have given you my tears, my joys, and I love you all for what you guys do for us. And I can't wait for the next part of Kingdom Hearts. Well, that's it for this long-awaited video, so thank you so much, and I cannot wait until the next Kingdom Hearts game comes out. So I'm gonna go ahead and rest up, and you know, let's go ahead and take a look at something. Oh boy. Oh boy.